Hey! No. Summoner is one of the 4 classes in Terraria, and it plays much differently than all the other ones. Instead of shooting a gun or swinging a sword, you can command an army of minions to do your bidding. Sounds pretty fun, right? Well, it is, especially after the changes the Journey's End update brought. However, there is something I want to say about the class. Summoner isn't good. Okay, it's more like Summoner is very powerful in some ways, but it has some glaring flaws that keep it from being on par with all the other classes. Look, I've played Normal Mode Summoner, I've played Master Mode Summoner, I've played Calamity Summoner. Twice. I've done Thorium Bard. No, get out of here, shoo! The point is, I've been playing a lot of the class recently, and I've taken quite a liking to the class despite its issues. I think it's safe to say that I've gotten a real feel for how it plays and have a good idea about its strengths and weaknesses. I think the most appropriate way to start would be to discuss what Summoner brings to the table. When playing the class, you'll have access to a pretty large assortment of staves. These can conjure up things from little slimes and birds to cosmic swords and dragons that will chase down your foes. You can also cast a plethora of stationary sentries to lock down areas of the screen. With enough minions, you can shut down an entire screen of enemies without having to lift a finger, and that's the dream that all summoners strive to obtain. It can be really relaxing playing as a summoner, as you don't need to deal with the everyday nuisances that all the other classes have to deal with. Are you trying to build and enemies keep getting in the way? Obliterate these pests with your own personal army. Want to grind for a rare item without having to put in the effort of wiring traps? Hire some goons to do all the dirty work for you. Another perk of having this passive damage is the ability to focus on dodging. Some bosses like to vomit projectiles, and yes, before you say comment section, I know you are good enough to dodge everything headed your way, but please, tell me, how are you going to avoid this? Go on, I'll wait. Yeah, that's what I thought. It can be really hard to focus on attacking enemies while also avoiding attacks yourself, so being able to mostly focus on movement during these fights can help you avoid a lot of incoming damage. The best part? You can use any other weapon while your minions wail on the enemy. Granted, if you are committing yourself to a full-on summoner, weapons from other classes will be weaker, but it is nice to have a form of self-defense. Then again, why would you need it? It's not like your minions will just not do what you tell them to do, right? Oh. Oh no. Yep, it is too good to be true. 1.4 did greatly expand Summoner's arsenal. That doesn't really fix the problems that Summoner already has. So the way I see things, there are 2 major issues with Summoner at the moment. Iframes and the rarity of a lot of the summon items. I just want to make it clear that I'm not saying all this because I hate Summoner. I actually rather enjoy the class. It could just be surprisingly ineffective and pretty frustrating to play at times. First, I'll be going over iframes, and I'm going to sound like such a dork. Minions in Terraria are classified as projectiles, similar to things like arrows, spears, beams, etc. Most projectiles dissipate after contacting a foe, but some will pierce a target and continue to deal damage, which is what minions do. Terraria has a rule built into the code that states if a projectile hits an enemy and pierces a target, the enemy will become completely immune to all damage for a 1/6 of a second. Now that may not seem too long, I bet about 15 of those have just passed in the time it took me to say that, but when you have an army of projectiles with cute faces, all trying to hit a single target, things can get messy. Not only can minions cancel out your own attacks, but they can also nullify attacks from other minions. This can lead to a weird cycle of your creatures attacking a single target, but said target taking minimal damage. For this reason, it could actually be detrimental trying to maximize the amount of minions you can summon instead of trying to increase the damage of each individual minion. Quality over quantity. Now there are a few summons that ignore iframes, and a lot of them were introduced in 1.4. The Blade Staff, the Desert Tiger Staff, and the Terra Prisma are all examples of these, and they are great. But that leads us to the second major problem of Summoner. It's nearly impossible to acquire most weapons. Yeah, Summoner has a lot of items to play around with, but many of them are really difficult to obtain. Take a look at the early game, for example. I know in theory, Summoner could eliminate most of the challenge of the game by keeping normal enemies away from you, but the real only 2 options you have, The slime staff and the finch staff are not guaranteed to appear in your world. How about early hard mode? You've just entered a world that will relentlessly kill you over and over, and what options do you have to protect yourself? The spider staff isn't the worst thing to get, but performs very poorly against some enemies and bosses in my experience. The pirate staff is way too rare for its own good, along with the blade staff. And the sanguine, I don't care, staff. Have you ever heard of blood moon fishing? No matter what your answer to that question might be, can we agree that unless somebody went out of their way to look it up on the wiki, that no player in their right mind would ever think to fish during a blood moon for exclusive drops? Oh, and the Terra Prisma? Don't even get me started on that. I don't care what arguments you have against me, this thing is stupid. This problem sort of fixes itself after you beat Plantera, and many easy to acquire options become available, but that's in the final third of the game. Having to go through hours and hours of grinding for these items can really kill the pacing of an otherwise excellent game. Oh yeah, whips. Can we talk about whips? I love whips. I know in my previous Summoner video, I said that all Summoner does is run away, which I guess can still be true, but whips heavily encourage the class to get up close and personal with foes. While it is a risk-reward scenario since Summoner does have the lowest survivability of all classes, you're in it for the bonus damage and the juicy special effects that the whips provide. Basic whips can increase the base damage of your minions. The Durandal can strike things at ridiculous speeds. The Morningstar is stupid good against regular enemies and against regular friends. The Cool Whip, okay, the Cool Whip is kind of bad, but the Kaleidoscope allows your minions to dish out critical strikes, which is sort of not okay. The only problem I can think of is that there aren't enough of them. I need to destroy my ears more. There are more things I could talk about, such as armor sets, accessories, and more minion mechanics, but I think I've covered just about everything I wanted to. Summoner has been on quite the journey over the past few years, from starting out with like 4 weapons to flourishing and being able to compete with all the other classes. If you haven't given the class a shot yet, go do yourself a favor and change that. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to return to my dumpster. Take care.